Hi, today is the 21st of May, and I would like to read with you in Romans chapter 5, verse 2. Romans chapter 5, verse 2. Through whom we have gained access by faith into his grace, in which we now stand, and we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. We have been meditating on chapter 4 and now on chapter 5. On grace. In chapter 4, Paul, to illustrate, to talk about the work of God in us by his Spirit to make us righteous before him, he tells the story of Abraham, Sarah, and their son Isaac, and how an old couple could have a child in spite of the non-hope in spite of all the impossibilities, they could have a child, and Sarah could bear a child, though she was sterile and she was old, by faith. And now in chapter 5, Paul is telling us that through this righteousness, we have now peace with God, because we have been justified, we have been transformed by Jesus, and now we have got peace with God, we are in peace with him. And in verse 2, he's talking about the access we have into the presence of God through the same Christ, because we have been made righteous before God. The word used here, it's the same, it's a word that was used to talk about the introduction of someone in the presence of the king. So we have access into the throne of God. We can appear before the throne of God. Actually, it was Christ, because the text says that it is through Christ we have gained access by faith into his grace. And we find our word grace here. Jesus introduces into God's grace, as if he's introducing us to the King. That's what is happening here, to the King, in the presence of the King. And that's a wonderful thing that only him can do. Paul is going to use the same idea in the letter that he wrote to the church in Ephesus. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 18. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. And the word both here is very important, because in this letter, Paul is telling us that the church of God, the new society of God, is a church that is composed by Jewish people and non-Jewish people, by people from every nation. In our French church here in France, which is a Baptist church, we counted the other day that we had about 26 different nationalities in our church, and about 20 different languages. It's a small church, because churches in France in general, especially in an area like the area where we live here, are very small. It is beautiful to see how these people from different nations, from the Middle East, from Latin America, from North America, from France and Europe, can live together, even from Asia, can live together and can worship together, can sing together, using the language in common, which is French. And Paul is telling these Christians in Ephesus that there is no division now, and we have both access to the throne of grace by the same Spirit. We are guided by the same Spirit. It's not by our strength, but it is by the power of the Lord, by his Spirit. And again, in Ephesians chapter 3, he uses the same idea in verse 12. In him, and through faith in him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence. And now we have these two important words here: freedom and confidence. There is no fear when we come into his presence. And it's not an occasional visit. We're not coming to say hello, to present him our needs, and then we go back to our old life. It's not occasional. is eternal. When I was a child, when I was a youngster in Brazil, I heard some people, some adults, praying and saying, God, entering into your presence, into thy presence. And then one day I realized that there was something wrong with that, with those prayers. Because we don't enter into the presence of God and then the next day we go home. We inhabit, we stay in the presence of God. I think the main problem with Christianity today and all the time is that people believed that they could enter and then go back to their old life. Like on Sunday, when you go to church, you enter the presence of God, and then when you go back home, you leave the presence of God and you go somewhere else. There is no somewhere else with a disciple of Christ. We are in the presence of God all the time, because Christ is in us. That's what Paul is telling the Colossians church. Christ in you is the hope of glory. Imagine one day if a child comes to your door, knocks at your door, and you open the door and you see this 7 years old, 6 years old child there knocking at your door. You have no clue. You don't know who this child is. You don't know which family this child is from, if the child is from the area, if it's from that street. You don't know. Are you going to let the child in and just, well, enjoy yourself? I'll find you a place to play. Are you hungry? Well, you can feed the child. But eventually you have to call the police or try to know where this child is from, her family name. But if one day your child, who is 6 or 7, comes to your house, to the door, knocks at the door with another child, this other child is going to enter the house because it's a friend of your son, of your daughter. When Jesus comes into the presence of God with us, is our eldest brother bringing us into the presence of the Father. Jesus is the only way, he says. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the one who introduces us, and him alone is the one who can do that, into the presence of God. So grace has placed you before the throne of God. Stay there. God bless you.